Happy Friday. This is Lacey with Let's Get Foxy. I hope that you're ready for today's episode. Or at least I know that I need to connect with happier times, so hopefully you do too. So today's book actually comes from a series of short stories. And this one is near and dear to my heart. I grew up reading these as a child, and I was so excited when they made a movie. Granted, they did have some, short films for this that were like 30 minutes long growing up. My husband again looks at me like I have two heads. Somebody out there, please tell me you've seen them, you've heard of them, please. It can't just be me. um, but when they made a full-length movie, it actually turned into something that was quite popular in my house. My son absolutely loves it. He is a huge Peter Rabbit fan, and that is what today's story is, The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. And something that I learned while I was doing my research for this was my husband didn't know that this was originally a book, or that she wrote more than just this story. Yeah, I was really taken aback. I am questioning the educational system because I think that we're failing people. I hope that, this will help you to connect to your inner child or get a smile. So we are going to talk about Beatrix Potter. She spent a lot of her childhood outside. She was an artist from a young age. She was constantly outside drawing plants and animals, and she would just fill her sketchbooks. When her brother Bertram was born, they actually would smuggle pets and animals into the classroom, which I'm sure thrilled her governesses. I bet they were so happy because they're bringing in frogs, hedgehogs, rabbits, you name it, they brought it in or they tried to. And what's fun is her tales, her little tales as she called them, they were actually inspired by different aspects of her life, from growing up to adulthood. For example, when you look at her animal characters, she actually grew up with pet rabbits. The first one's name was actually Benjamin Bouncer, and the one who came after was Peter Piper. So you can hear that this is where she got the inspiration for her characters and their names. And she was an absolutely incredible woman. And what I mean by that is she was so accomplished in her life. She was a writer, an artist, an entrepreneur, gardener, scientist, farmer, and preservationist. So not only did she write over 20 of her little tales, as she called them, not only did she write over 20 of them, she also illustrated them. She was the one who did the artwork. So if you remember looking at those stories and seeing those happy bunnies or the kittens, that was Beatrix Potter. That was all her. She was amazing. Like, when they talk about her being an avid gardener, her hands were always in the dirt. She would even go to her neighbor's house and help clean things up, and apparently she would also get some plants from them that she didn't necessarily have. I like to think that she got permission when she did that, but sources are looking like she may not have done that every time. She actually bought land to help protect the land from development. So she bought her own properties. And as a farmer, she enjoyed learning about the different crops and things, and she actually bred sheep. I mean, have you heard of a woman back then who did that? Because we're talking mid 1800s to early 1900s, guys, and she's doing all of this. She actually came up with the concept for the Tale of Peter Rabbit by writing to her best friend's son. So she used to send letters to all of her friends and their kids, and when she would do that, she would actually draw little pictures. So they would call them her picture letters, and she would send them. And so she sent this particular letter to her friend's son, and it details the story, the concept of Peter Rabbit in there. And it's just, I was looking at the letter because it's on this a website that's dedicated to her. It's a nonprofit, and it was amazing. It was so cute looking at the first sketchings of the story. It was really cute. And so when she decided that she was ready to publish, because her friend was like, hey, you should publish your stories. These are incredible. Kids love them. She reached out to publishers, and she was actually turned down by multiple publishers. And so she was determined. Nothing could stop her. And so she actually self-published The Tale of Peter Rabbit herself in December of 1901, and she did exactly 250 copies. Now, when she did that publishing, she actually got the interest from people who had turned her down. It was then published through Frederick Warne and Co. in 1902. And her stories made her a massive success during her life, and we all know her name today. You know, she's beloved by generations, and her tales have actually been translated in over 35 languages. She had this keen entrepreneurial spirit, so after she had published Peter Rabbit and everything was going on, she actually made a Peter Rabbit doll in 1903. She went ahead and got him licensed. So Peter Rabbit is one of the oldest licensed characters today because he's been licensed since 1903, which is amazing because she's a woman during a time when women were belittled and looked down on. That's not to say that she didn't have problems and doors shut in her face, because remember, they denied publishing her book in the beginning, but before that, she wanted to be a scientist, and she was studying fungi. And she actually wrote a paper, and they denied publishing it because they wanted a little bit more work done. But she didn't even get to present it to the committee because the societies didn't allow women to be part of them during that time. How crazy is that? Sorry, I digress. So, when she licensed Peter Rabbit, she recognized that merchandise, such as painting books, board games, and wallpaper, were marketing assets for her work. So she actually went and she designed these different things based off of her stories, off of her characters, to sell. And then she made enough money from her merchandise that it actually helped her to buy land in the Lake District. And that's incredible. Because when I say that she bought land, she bought it with her own money. Yes, her family was well off, and we'll get into that in probably a different book, because I will probably do all of her tales, because I think they're great. I think they're fun for families. But she was crazy about preserving nature, and when people were coming in to develop the land, she took a stand. So she actually bought land so that it could remain farmland or wild. And she helped to preserve much of what is still considered beautiful and green in England. It's a wonderful, cool thing. But enough chit chat. I have rambled on long enough and probably, got you bored. So, with no further ado, let's start our story. Before our book reading begins, I just wanted to take a minute to say this book is a snapshot of the past. This book may contain negative views and or treatment of people and cultures. This was wrong then, and it is wrong now. Instead of blacklisting these novels, let's recognize the influence and learn from it. For as the philosopher George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Let's learn from the past to create a more inclusive future together. The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella, and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees, planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether, if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net, and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost, and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement, and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed, and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in, if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently Peter sneezed. Kerchoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all round. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish, but she sat very, very still. But now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out, and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow, and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate, and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to that big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole, and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Isn't that a fun story? It's so easy to see how it has remained a family favorite throughout the years. So, we're not going to do tons of analysis for this particular tale. I don't think it needs it. But essentially what our story does is it shows the consequences that could happen if children are disobedient, which is a nice, before bed story. because we all grew up with hearing cautionary tales or, you know, the boy who cried wolf got what was coming to him because he cried out so many times so no one came to help him. So in the case of Peter Rabbit, he was warned and told by his mother to stay out of the garden because of what had happened to his dad. And he literally went through that entire adventure because he disobeyed. And he was nearly turned into a pie. Like it's a great way to help teach children about consequences and still have it be fun. And it's more focused on the fun and not harsh, well, as harsh as what you would expect from that time period, because a lot of the stories and tales, even for children, had a much more harsh aspect to them. So I personally love this particular story, and it is crazy to think when you enjoy something so much that in the case of this particular short story, it all started with a letter. How cool is that? You don't hear that for a lot of things that come out today, or at least I don't in today's world. And it makes it that much more special because this particular story was, it all began as a letter to a little boy where she was just sharing a bit of the magic, and you gotta listen to your mom. And it grew into such a huge, huge, writing and illustrations, and it allowed her to have an impact on so many others. And so she's truly an inspiring person. My son would really like us to go watch the movie all over again. So if you haven't already, please like or follow me. I would greatly appreciate it. That way you can find me again if you are interested. All of my Patreon patrons get everything first. So if you're interested, go ahead and find me on there. That way you can get everything right as it comes out. And you can send me questions. So if you have any questions about the tale of Peter Rabbit or which Potter little tale that I'm going to do next, let me know. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.